Good morning. Hi, welcome. This is Angela Coulter, your Consciousness Transformation Ascension Guide, originator of Trinity Energy Progression, bringing you this week's Living the Shift. And I purposely sat there for a minute just to let us gather and connect in the heart. This week's topic is about, what's that brick wall trying to tell you? Oh, excuse my yawn. I had not yawned once before I got on, but that's how it always goes, right? We have a lot going on around us. It's very seemingly chaotic, which of course is, if anything around us is present, then it's within us as well. So there's so if we think about that, it's like, okay, so what is the outside of chaos reflecting back to me of what's inside of me? And it's like, well, in all honesty, we have a lot of shifting going on. We have a lot of changes going on. We're being asked to, change direction on a dime. And we've been pushed and pushed and pushed. We've pushed ourselves in consciousness to get to this place of fluidity and flexibility. And then we think we've gotten there, right? And so what happened was last week was a really challenging week. Thus my podcast on temper tantrums, conscious temper tantrums. But you know where the temper tantrums come from is feeling like you're hitting a brick wall over and over again. I mean, from my perspective, that's how it sort of comes to pass, right? It's like, well, at some point you get tired of hitting that brick wall again and again and again. And it's like, well, but I keep on getting to take this, to take this direction, or we think we're getting to take a certain direction. And then because it's not what we expect, right? Think of all these things. Think, expect, all ego. We get frustrated and then we get stubborn and then we decide we're just going to push harder. We're not doing it right. We're not doing it hard enough. No pain, no gain, right? And yet there's a very different way to also look at this. Oh my goodness. I slept well last night, I promise. Of course, this is a very big topic collectively because we have been going through a collective temper tantrum. So there's something to step back and look at around that, right? So it's interesting because there's in this movie, Men Who Stare at Goats. Very funny movie from a perspective of consciousness. Very dry humor. It has, oh my gosh, I see his face. I can't think of his name. George Clooney, that's it. And it's actually an all-star cast. Kevin Spacey. Yeah, a lot of faces that I can see in my head. I can't remember the names. But John Malkovich, there's a lot in that movie that have to do. The whole story is about, like, it's based on the story of the U.S. military doing psyops since like World War II, or Korea, and there's the whole story is this. Ewan McGregor plays a reporter who's looking into this whole program, right? That's yes, supposed to be retired, not retired, all that kind of stuff. But anyway, all of it has to do with quantum physics, has to do with psyops, has to do with inner projection and remote viewing and being able to change your reality and all that kind of stuff. And it's really fun, and it's really done in a very dry way. But anyway, so there's this little side thing, right, about how, and they'll have these little narrations every once in a while about how, if you keep on hitting a wall, the same way over and over and over and over again, eventually the molecules will rearrange in quantum physics so that your hand will go through the wall eventually. And there are elements that are connected to the ability to be able to do that, and that has to do with all this other stuff, that they're training on. But there's this little side thing. It's funny. There's a guy who will randomly just get up from his desk, look at a wall, and run at the wall, full on. And then, throughout the movie, We'll just hit the wall and fall on the floor. Hit the wall and fall on the floor. In the end, he finally goes through, right? So, there is that theory that if you keep on hitting the wall, eventually you'll go through. But then, do we believe we have to keep on hitting that wall? And do we believe that we're supposed to keep on hitting that wall and push our way through? Because we sort of believe that in many ways the human journey has to do with pushing our way through stuff. We call it the epic journey. So we have the story of overcoming obstacles and overcoming challenges and limitations, and the more limitations and the more suffering and the more challenges that we overcome, the more interesting we find the story. So in essence, sometimes it's an addiction to drama, right? Sometimes it's a matter of worthiness, right? So over in Ascended World, we've started the Wonderland program, and the worthiness course is the first one. But when we believe that we can't do something without that story, that we can't accomplish anything, or it's going to be less fulfilling or less exalted if we don't go through this big epic journey to have the big story. And it makes me think of the Iliad, right? I talk about an epic journey, right? So, you have that on one hand. So that's one of the areas that cause us to continue on down a path, and we think, oh no, I'm supposed to suffer through this to get to the other side. And sometimes it's your expanded self just saying, not a great choice, or not a great choice, but this is really our choice. But the ego keeps on deciding that this is our choice. Why? We feel like at some level we've decided that coming through that brick wall is somehow going to pay off. It's going to be worth it. It's going to be worth the big fight. And we believe that, again, back to the addiction to the story. And then we believe, if I start in this direction, that I must commit and stay in this direction, and this is my purpose, and this is what I'm here for. And we get really attached to what those outcomes are supposed to look like. And when we do that, that's ego taking over, going, oh no, this is my box. This is how I've projected it to look like. This is what I expect it to look like, right? Project and expect, both ego words and energies. And then it's like, okay, so, but this is what I've done. And so what happens is, time and time again, I've had this conversation with others and with myself. It's, well, but I've come this far, why give up now? Or I can't do anything else because this is all I've done. This is what I went to school for. This is what I trained for. I can't pay my bills otherwise. I mean, these are the things that we decide for ourselves from the ego that we can't change because we've started in a direction, so we've got to finish it. What if we changed that entire direction and instead decided to say, okay, well, let me step back for a minute. Let me stop for a moment from banging my head against that wall. Let me stop from running full body into that wall over and over again. Let me ask, is there a different way to do this? And part of it, part of the challenge is a majority of us don't trust our guidance over our ego, because the ego is very slick. And it's not that it's a bad thing, and I've never said that the ego is bad. I've always said the ego has a perfect place, because the ego, as my understanding, has been created to explore separation identity. And in separation, it's, the fear and the anxiety and the projection, the blame, the judgment, the shame, all that kind of stuff. Pain. And yet, for us to get to to remember our expanded consciousness, to live in that enlightened state, the ascended state of remembered consciousness, not learned, not attained, just remembered, is getting more and more into the practice of the ego, of saying, yeah, you know what? I still get there, whether I have a really epic, suffering thing, or I just get there having fun and laughing and sharing love and and, seeing the divine in everybody else. And so we say, okay, I get that. I get that idea. I get that perception. But then we're starting to get pushed into areas that were really uncomfortable. So like I've had many conversations, including with myself, of, well, I've done this for so long. This is my life's work. This is what, this is what I was here to do. And it's like, well, maybe you're done with that. Maybe that was one of your life's works, and now it's time to move on to something else. And we're so attached. We put that so much of that into our ego that we have a challenging time of letting go. And this can be being married to somebody. This can be being in a certain kind of job. This can be doing something a certain way. This could be, having a certain kind of relationship, being a certain kind of person. It can be all kinds of things that it's like, okay, so guess what? You have had that experience to its fullest, and now let it be complete and move on to something else. So when you do that, then we allow the universe to shift around us. Our expanded consciousness is, oh, yeah, yay, we're going to stop running into the brick wall. Yay. And then usually, once we allow that and really truly open our heart to those possibilities, we then will start seeing different pathways and different options, different possibilities. And we can sit there and say, I'm open to all possibilities. But then if we listen to ourselves saying, but, oh no, I can't do that because, right? That's a but, really. Oh, well, I would love to do this, but I can't because. And you could put any blank in there, because I'll not make enough money. Like you're already creating the situation if I can't make enough money doing this. So I'm just not gonna. Yeah. And I'm like, well, what if it's not only will you make enough money, but you'll make way more than you're making now once you allow yourself to really immerse yourself in it, or do something differently, or approach it in a different way. Then it's something to look at from a different perspective. So, 95% of us running into the brick wall over and over and over again is ego. And the more we get into a place of expanded consciousness, but the thing is that the ego can be so tricky. It can be so sly, because the more conscious we become, the more sly it has to get to be an influencer, right? And so we forget to look at that, right? And again, we get into something, we love it, we enjoy it for an X amount of time, we do all this stuff, and then sometimes it's time to move on to something else. Sometimes, or it's time to move on to something the same thing in a different way. But then we become attached to, oh, well, no, I've loved this. I enjoy it so much. And then, we decide, well, this is the only thing this makes me tick. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say there's not one thing for any of us that makes us tick. Like there are things we love, right? And we can say we love. So here's an example. I use this example over the years. I haven't used it for a while, but this is a good one in this context. And let's even just go into, good morning, Gloria. Let's just go into this detail of, a specific area, right? So I was working with somebody who in her 50s, she was doing a ton of self-discovery work, a ton of shifting and releasing and embracing of an expanded part of herself. And finally, we came to the point where I was guided to ask her, so what is it, that makes your heart sing? What makes your heart sing? What would you love to do? And there was this hesitation. And I said, nope, no buts, because I heard the hesitation. As soon as there's hesitation, that means there's a but in there. And she said, well, when I was younger, like for years, I really wanted to be a dancer, which is something I hadn't known. Like, and I'd been working with this person, and I had known them for quite a while. And I said, really? And she said, yeah, when I was, my young adulthood and teens, I did this dancing, and I really, that's what I wanted to do. And that's not the direction I took. And I said, okay, so are you dancing in any way? And she's like, no. And I'm like, so dance. And there was a hesitation. And I said, why? Because you're in your 50s. I mean, or 40s or 50s or whatever it was. And I said, it doesn't matter. He said, so when you say you love to dance, I'm like, there's many kinds of dancing. And you can dance for fun. You can dance and create that as your living, right? And you can say, oh no, I can't because I'm not in shape or I haven't trained for 500 years. And it's the but. And I'm like, but if you love to dance, then find a way to dance. I said that to many people who have passions about something, and then they just never pursued it, you know. And so fast forward, I don't know, this is 10 years later now, about that, less than that, 9 years, something like that. And you know, they're doing it. They're, you know what, it started out with taking like Zumba, with becoming an instructor with that, becoming an instructor in several different kind of like cardio fitness things, like dance fitness classes and things like that, and then creating her own. And it started out because that it was like this repressed thing, because, and she always went in this direction, she always like did her life this way. And it's not, I'm not picking on this one particular role because I just think it's a great example, but there are many that I've talked to and said, well, okay, if you want to sing, then sing. If you want to do art, then do art. Find a way to do it. And I'm not saying to drop everything today and change the direction of your entire life right now. But if you allow yourself to start letting your heart to sing its bliss by doing the things that feel so flowing and open for you, then everything else will start to do that. There's another person I worked with that had same thing about singing. And I said, so sing. Find a way to sing. They started going to like a karaoke bar, and then they met somebody who needed a backup singer in a band, and before you knew it, she was co-leading the band, and then she had her own, and it's just been this thing. And yeah, is it a full-time thing? It was full-time for a while. She's, changed direction, not changed directions, but she's doing some other stuff and doing this, and she's finding her balance of the things that she loves to do. But I remember when she started singing with that first band, and she said to me, all of a sudden I had this, it was like, dreaming in black and white, and then it shifted to color, right? And she's like, and then it was like this part of my life was so vibrant and rich and full of saturated color, and I was so, happy in it. And in comparison, I realized everything else in my life sort of felt black and white. And that actually started a huge transformation, just allowing herself to do that on the side. This was somebody who had a very successful business and everything else. And then she started changing all these other things. And it was like one step at a time. And there were some major changes. And it was all because she started by letting her heart come out. And it's changed over the years. It's changed direction and what it looks like. And that's okay. So, you know what? I've talked so much over the years about allowing your heart to lead the way, allowing which is your expanded self, leading your expanded self to lead the way, to allow yourself your bliss, to allow yourself to be that embodiment here. I've talked about that till I can turn blue in the face. So what happens though is then we become attached to that, right? Because it's like an addiction. Oh God, I feel so good doing this. And then when we start hitting things like brick walls, right away we're like, oh yeah, or we get attached to it so much. It's like, no, I gotta push. I'm pushing myself. And sometimes we become blind to other options. Sometimes we become blind to, well, I can do this and do it in this context and still love it, right? And maybe that's the way to really do more of it, or that's the way to continue doing it, or maybe doing it in a different way or learning different kinds of ways of doing it. Maybe that will expand my horizons and my possibilities in what I do in terms of embodying that, right? So we get stuck in like, oh, I know this kind of whatever, right? And it tends to be a lot of times the arts, because the arts have to do with our right brain, which is where our intuition is. So creativity and all that kind of stuff is connected to our intuition. And when our expanded self wants to really step in and let us embody our full potential, it's a real pull to follow that heart, because allowing ourselves that peace of ecstasy and bliss in every day allows us to see where else in our lives we can align to have that energy as well. So what's going on right now is that many are getting guided to change direction entirely, and it gets scary to the ego, right? Because it's like, oh, well, no, I fought to get here. I did all this stuff. I've done, and including myself, it's like, oh, I've done all this stuff. I've done it this way. I've done it in this fashion. And then, guidance is, well, there's other ways to do it, or there are other things to do. And for you to do these other things is for you to let go of some of this. And the ego goes, no, 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 but this has brought me so much happiness. And it's like, well, but if you keep on hitting your head against the brick wall, that's not allowing you your bliss. That's not allowing your own happiness. That's saying I have to suffer to have my happiness, right? I have to sacrifice, right? Sometimes we think, oh, I have to sacrifice and give this up so I can have this. And we have so many quotes about that in our entire world about, like you have to give up something to have what you want, right? Magic always comes with a consequence. I've heard that one in so many different forms and contexts and stories and books and movies. And it's like, but our magic is our bliss. And it doesn't have a consequence unless we choose to create that. And so, and there's nothing that says that once I find or allow myself this level of bliss, that I'm not going to be able to find it in other ways. Maybe it's taken me this to really explore my bliss so that now I can, with this open heart, look in these other directions and say, where else can I embody my bliss where it's even more saturated and more colorful? So you can tie it back to where I started, which is the worthiness thing, right? So because at many levels we think, oh, well, I'm just lucky I found this thing, right? This bliss. And then we say, and this is good enough. This is enough. And so we then want to stay here. And then we say, okay, well, then the ego says, I'm going to put a box around it because, oh, this feels so great compared to where we were before. And then, so therefore, we have this undercurrent belief of, well, this is enough. This is enough. I don't need more than this. And it's like, but what if there's even more? What if there's way more? And so when we do that, we then can open our heart to the possibilities and say, well, what does that look like? Because it doesn't have to look exactly the same way. It doesn't have to look exactly the same way. And, a lot of times what the mind thinks is what you really want to do is it's just a piece or facet of the whole thing. And sometimes we have to take stops along the journey to say, you know what, I am really going to saturate myself in this. I'm going to be present with it. I'm going to allow it. And then when it's time to move on, the thing is to open our hearts and allow ourselves to say, okay, now I have this foundation and now I'm allowing myself even more. I'm allowing myself an even, broader state of bliss and even more ecstasy, more, joy and laughter, even more. And I have so much gratitude for all of this. Right. And the thing is to come to gratitude for everything that's led up to right now, because every step allows us, when we commit to that, we allow ourselves to open up a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, in allowing all that to come through and our true potential and our true purpose to come through in a place of bliss and love and ease. And so that's the thing to look at as well. This is great. Yeah, of course this is great. And then maybe there's something even greater. What else is there? What else? What more is there for me to explore? Instead of, no, I want to stay in this box. And that's our hitting ourselves against the brick wall. Staying in this box, I'm doing this way. I have to continue this. And then what you really, the real hard look for you to take, for all of us to take is, if we have been, running into that brick wall again and again and again, there are some parts of us that are starting to get tired, right? So, think about it. If you run into, going back to that movie I was talking about, The Men Who Stare at Goats, the guy just kept on running into the wall, and it's like, well, okay, if you're truly, committed to doing that, I mean, he does succeed in the end, but the thing is, at some point your body's going to say, whoa, enough of that. Well, and at some point your energy body is going to say the same thing. right? And be like, yeah. And so the thing to look at is, what if I do? I feel tired? Do I feel frustrated? Or do I have all the energy in the world to continue running into this wall? And am I happy doing it? Is it blissful without any pain whatsoever? And most of the time there is something. Those are the things to start looking at, is what drags me down or makes me feel like, oh, I have to do that to stay here. I have to continue doing this to stay here instead of allowing myself to move on. Those are the areas that are really important for us to start looking at. It's like, okay, because, all right, running into this brick wall again and again is starting to hurt. It's starting to be tiring, right? We start getting weary. We start getting, into avoidance and distraction and procrastination and things like that. And when we get away from, like when we look at that as a message to ourselves to say, oh, well, maybe there's something for me to shift here. And what is there for me that I am, what is A? So am I tired or irritated because of something that I don't like, and why don't I like it? And that's something to look at. But B also is, if it's something that I never minded doing before and now it's starting to become cumbersome or a chore because so that I can attain the same space, then maybe I need to look at this and ask my guidance. So what else is there for me to do? Or is there something for me to be or do differently? And if there is, then let me have conscious clarity and clear guidance every step of the way. I'm allowing myself that. I'm going to open my heart to that. And when you do that, it's a commitment, because I know many people who say that and they don't really want to because it's too uncomfortable to the ego, and they keep on getting stuff laid in front of them and they're like, oh, that's really great, but I still have to do all this stuff because this is where, I make my money, or this is where blah, blah, blah. And it's like, but if we take these baby steps going this way, then at some point it all starts to tie together and be a much bigger picture and much more powerful and much more blissful. So your home play for this week is look at your life, look where in your life you might feel like you're, hitting against a brick wall again and again, where you feel limited, where you feel like even if you are doing, so there are some who have not even started to investigate or look into their heart to say, what is it that would make me bliss, that would allow my bliss, right? Not a person or whatever. What would there be for me to be or do that would allow me to express and embody my bliss, right? There are many out there who unfortunately don't even let themselves remember that. But then for those of us who have gotten to that, to where we have been in the now for whatever period of time, but yet we feel like we've been hitting like a brick wall or something like that. Well, the thing is for you to look at, okay, where is the brick wall? Like, what does the brick wall represent? Pretend you're the brick wall. Go into meditation. Say, if I'm the brick wall, what is this? What is this showing me? What am I saying as the brick wall, right? And then you can say, okay, so now is there something else for me to, somewhere else for me to go, something else for me to see? And then set yourself to open your heart to allow the possibilities, all possibilities, and to have it, set yourself to have it laid out clearly in front of you, and to commit to seeing it and accepting it and considering it. That's the big part, because it can be laid out and thrown in front of you, bite you in the nose. And if the ego has that lockdown, then you're not going to get conscious beyond that. Then it's just going to die away eventually until you have some big monster, big monster crisis. I couldn't think of the word crisis, that will force you into that different direction, which I choose not to do that. I choose not to do that because we've all had those in different parts of our lives. So again, it could be anything. It could be relationships that you're in that you think I've been in forever, so I need to stay. Or, it could be a whole bunch of different things. So it could be your job, could be what you're doing, could be something that you bought, that garnered you great joy and doesn't really as much anymore because there's something that's really frustrating. There's something that makes you feel chained to it or chained from it. And those are the big messages for us to look at. So a lot to do this week. But do it with observance and acceptance and gratitude, because everything we've done has brought us to here. Everything we've chosen to do brings us to this right now moment, and it's holographic. It's not just linear. And so have the gratitude for all of it and say, okay, so now with all of that under my belt, what is the bigger picture for me to see? And maybe the different direction for me to go. So on that, I'm going to let you go. Thank you for joining me. Have a great week. This is Angela Coulter signing off with this week's Living the Shift.